America's going through the worst drug crisis in its history, and is tearing families apart. A generation of children is being neglected, abandoned, or orphaned by parents addicted to opioids.
The most powerful force in this world is not a nuclear bomb. It is not the United States military. As a matter of fact, it is not all the militaries of all the world put together. The most powerful force in the human world, in the world of humanity, by the way, has always been the mind.
You got one, huh? Yeah. There's a call on a possible double overdose. People here liken the drug crisis to a war, with police and EMTs on the front lines. In the last few years, they've responded to more overdose calls than ever.
It's like a tsunami has hit. But we just keep digging. Maybe the first time was a choice, the second time may have been a choice, but after that, the demon has possession of them.
Come on. Hey, wake up.
Scenes like this are happening in homes across the country. And when kids are there, you can only imagine how they process it.
And we're heading, okay, into this very murky future, okay, of the world, okay, with terrorism on the rise. And I don't know how this generation is going to cope with that. I don't think they have the ability to cope with it. And so I think we're heading towards something like late Rome.
It's sad the world the way it is today with the kids.
As Chillicothe and the rest of the nation struggle to contain the opioid epidemic, there's no doubt that the next generation is being shaped by it. The question, which will take years to resolve, is how.
Last year in Ontario alone,
the norm back in the day used to be a mom, a dad, 2 dogs, 2 kids. Now it's maybe a parent, maybe a grandmother, maybe an uncle, maybe a foster home, maybe just a whole lot of babies.
now the MTA has issued a new mandate. Announcements made by conductors are gender neutral in an effort to include all people.
Hello everyone, there is a Brooklyn-bound A express train approaching 42nd Street.
Yes.
So we get these hyper-masculine societies.
Exactly.
And we're, worried about
and we're into like
toxic masculinity
yes,
and the Ivy
let's
League.
blend. Let's do like gender bending things. To me, it's like one of my favorite movies, The Time Machine, okay, which is a movie from my high school years of H.G. Wells' novel, a futuristic novel. And you have humanity has split at the end, okay, into the Morlocks, where there's a horrible or industrial, they're kind of subterranean enslavers, and then you have the Eloi. The Eloi are all very gender bending, and they're like the boys are very girlish, and they're all kind of they're eating fruits, and they're lying, and they're enjoying life, and everything's very hedonistic. There's a girl drowning. Look, a girl is drowning. They can't do anything about it. And that's what our universities, our elite schools are turning out. The Eloi.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Well, there we are.
So your view is this is political correctness run amok?
Yeah, I mean, it's the furthest extension of political correctness. That when you say something, that it's not just me disagreeing with you, it is me destroying your identity as a human being in a way that is akin to violence.
So all of this maneuvering and in diversity training and sexual harassment sensitivity training, all that stuff, this has to stop. Okay, this is real. This is sick. It's Kafkaesque. It's like out of a nightmare, Twilight Zone world. How have we tolerated this?
They said Ben Shapiro has openly called transgender people mentally ill. He portrays the great gay rights movement as a conspiracy to root out God-based institutions. He has recently defended conversion therapy, which is nothing short of abuse.
Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are just not true there. I am unaware of any time that I have ever defended conversion therapy as such, said that it's effective, because I don't see the evidence that it's effective.
What about this idea that you call transgender people mentally ill?
I do say that transgenderism is a mental illness, because it's gender dysphoria. It's a psychological disorder. So that's not an insult to people who suffer from psychological disorders. You are not doing a service to people who are suffering from a mental disorder to humor them by suggesting that their mental disorder is reflected in objective reality.
You're seeing this. We all see this, don't we? We see these things happening all across the United States, all across Canada, all across the West. We see these things happening. We're no longer discussing things civilly. We're just coming to basically fight each other as gladiatorial battles happen. It's led to a loss of civility, but it's also led to a loss of reason, because then we have the polar opposite thing happen, the opposite phenomenon, where we're not always saying they are them and we are us and they're always evil. Some of us want to make sure that everyone agrees and we all get along to the point where we ignore our differences and don't give each other the dignity of difference.
Where did this come about? I mean, how did this come about? And even at University of Santa Cruz, very enterprising professor of psychology has come up with a microaggression app, a mobile app. And so you can immediately report if you overhear someone making an off-color joke or something. And they're policing one another. It's an anonymous surveillance system that would have made the Stasi envious. And so you can now be reported. Oh, it's overheard. You made, and to see this.
But here's an example of new hatred, particularly of Christianity. I'll leave Islam. And Oxford College has suspended Christian Union from recruiting new, Little Stand Freshers Week, recruit new students, said, listen, you can't have that because you'll be alienating students from other religions. This is a microaggression because traditionally Christianity is being used as an excuse for homophobia and certain forms of neo-colonialism. Can you tell me why Christianity's got such a bad name?
Yeah, it's a fascinating phenomenon, this idea that Christianity, all of the bad things that you can possibly identify that might tangentially be associated with Christianity are the only thing that people focus on.
I have a funny story, though, about taking the Lord's name in vain. My parents were really strict about what we said in the home. We couldn't say, oh my God. We couldn't say JC, we couldn't say G. My son, I know. Yeah, we could say G's.
You could say G's, but not sus.
Yes, unless you were praising him, and then you could say. But my son,
So it's easier to reject the most, the religion which we know, which our parents might have practiced, than it is to say that there is a problem with other religions. So I think that what's happening is this sort of displacement that Christianity is feeling the brunt of what people might be wanting to be concerned about in another religion.
I think you're absolutely right. There's a blindness, there's blind acceptance of.
But go on. He said, look, here's my view. There is an objective truth out there. Truth actually exists in an objective sense. But we don't have all of it. None of us has all of it. And I said, so far you and I agree. He said, but here's the thing. All of us have versions of the truth, as incomplete as they may be. All of us have versions of the truth. So I challenged it a little bit. I said, all of us? Really? All of us? Pol Pot? Mao Zedong? Adolf Hitler? Joseph Stalin? Mussolini? Pick your despot. They had versions of the truth. This is what he said to me, and I'm telling you this, exactly what he told me. He said, I cannot say that I prefer their version of the truth, but I also cannot say that I disagree with it because mine is also incomplete. And I said, buddy, it's safe to say that you disagree with Hitler. No one's going to get mad at you for that. He said, I can't disagree with him. I said, so let me understand this straight. Are you telling me that you can't disagree with anybody? He said, that's right. I said, sure you can. He said, no, I can't. I said, you just did it. That's 15 years of lawyer training. My point, an otherwise very well-intentioned and very intelligent man, maybe even far more brilliant than I am, had his preferences that everyone just be considered equally valid in terms of their views or equally invalid, however you look at it, and all of it smoothed over, and he was sacrificing his reason on the altar of his preferences. And that is the very definition of what happens to us in a post-truth culture.
It's actually a natural phenomenon, and they're committing suicide because they're depressed because people are mistreating them.
Then I'm not for mistreatment, but I don't think that me suggesting that you're not a woman is mistreatment of you.
And we want freedom, okay? The colleges said the world is a dangerous place, okay? You could be attacked, you could be raped, okay? We said, okay, give us the freedom to risk rape. Freedom is much more important, okay, than protection and safety, okay? And that's what young people have given up today. They want reassurance, they want the parental eye on them, okay? And they've given up freedom. And with personal freedom goes freedom of thought, okay? And that's why we're not going to get anything interesting, okay, in intellect or the arts, okay, from a generation that has been coddled and infantilized the way this generation has been. Okay?
Well, we have become so sensitive. We have become so politically correct that we've lost a good chunk of our freedom. And it's like throwing that big old bullfrog into a pot of cold water on the stove, and you slowly turn up that heat. Before the bullfrog understands what's happening, it's too late. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's exactly where we are as a country right now.
What has happened is these young people now getting to college have no sense of history of any kind, no sense of history, no world geography, okay, no sense, okay, of the violence and the barbarities of history, okay. So they think that the whole world has always been like this, a kind of nice, comfortable world where you can go to the store and get orange juice and milk, and you can turn on the water and the hot water comes out, right? They have no sense whatever, okay, of destruction, okay, of the great civilizations that rose and fell and so on, and how, you know, and how arrogant people get when they're in a comfortable civilization, etc. Okay, right? So they now are being taught to look around them to see defects in America, which is the freest country in the history of the world, okay, and so on, and to feel, okay, that somehow America is the source of all evil in the universe. Okay? It's because they've never been exposed to the actual evil of the history of humanity.
I think our culture today, with all the shifts that are happening, we no longer have fixed points of reference. We're awash in the river. And we seem to like the vertigo. We seem to like all the changes and the no standards, and we can do and be and say whatever we want and all these kind of things.
Some strap hangers are fed up with the concern over political correctness.
I think that's silly, and I don't think it really offends anyone to say ladies and gentlemen.
I think it's innovative. It's great. I mean, at today's day and age, I mean, you are who you are.
Without the fixed points of reference, however, I think we've immersed ourselves fully into this post-truth culture. But also we can be comfortable in saying, no one disagrees. Can't we all just get along? We're looking for comfort, not truth.
His wife Amy printed and posted the signs after learning about the suicide rates in their town.
It's the helplessness.
I know a lot of people who are like, you know, I've gone to school with and stuff who have been depressed, who have attempted suicide or have committed suicide. And I mean, it really is a problem, especially with our generation.
How many deaths is it going to take? How many? How much is it going to take to make you realize that here at my school is an epidemic of depression and suicide?
There have been 9 suicides across the East Valley in just the last 13 weeks.
There's a much different mood inside Perry High School now than ever before. Just this school year, the Massillon School lost 3 students to suicide, most recently this week.
In response to the first suicide, now
for our kids, this is a tough time. We've talked a lot about this. It's a tough time to be a kid.
It really troubles me.
And Skyland Trails Chief Medical Officer, psychiatrist Dr. Raymond Kotwicki believes there are 2 key factors playing into why we're seeing this jump in suicides in America.
Heroin is stronger than any human tie. It is stronger than any compelling argument. It is stronger than a religious belief. It is the devil incarnate. It is evil. It's the Black Plague. It's like the zombie apocalypse. It's death.
It's kind of like you're possessed or something. Like you don't even care anymore. You don't know reality. Your reality is gone. Eventually, this cycle kills you if you don't get out.
There is a hole in their life. Why did they abandon me? Why didn't they love me enough to take care of me? Why didn't they love me enough to stop doing what they were doing? Why wasn't I worth it?
Finally, Dr. Kotwicki says substance abuse also plays a major role in suicides.
The sense of feeling like you actually matter or that you actually belong to a community looks like it really is plummeting.
In your mind, you make decisions every day. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm not going to do. This is where I'm going to go. This is where I'm not going to go. Your mind is the control center of who you are. And if you don't know this already, you better learn it. Our belief determines our behavior. Our belief determines our behavior. Let me tell you something. I don't have to ask any of you in this room what you believe about anything. I really don't. Show me how you live, and I'll show you what you believe. The rest is just talk. You cannot afford to lose this battle, because the only way to stay in control of you is to stay in control of your mind, because your mind controls you. Former President Woodrow Wilson put it this way. He said, "He that will not command his thoughts will soon lose command of his actions."
And now it has devolved into this sort of this very, very controlled, and I don't want to say Stalinist, but yes, Stalinist.
It is very codified. Like I just last week saw with the Penn State codification, of surveillance and how to report, and every category of possible offense is listed with the numbers to call, and they're encouraging people to report on fellow students, report on faculty, report on staff. This is madness. This has nothing whatever to do with intellectual development.
Now, this battle that Paul is talking about is all about knowledge and all about thoughts and all about arguments. Where do those come from? They come from our mind.
Has your ability to see whatever you want on the screens, to be with whoever you want, and whatever way you want, if that sets you free, or have these screens perhaps, but one example, enslaved you to a mechanistic view of the way humans actually are? Have you now reduced us, and even yourself, to the sum of your parts? That doesn't seem freedom giving. It seems to me to bind you to the physical forces around you.
Paul is saying, your mind's like a castle. It's like a stronghold. Your mind is like a fort, and it's constantly under attack. And your mind is the bullseye in this battle. And you say, wait a minute, why is the mind the bullseye? Why is the mind such a big deal? Why is it that Satan, more than anything else, would love to control my mind? It's real simple. Whatever controls your mind controls you.
More than the digital distractions, because our digital distractions have narrowed our worldview down from the natural and the supernatural down to just the natural, and now just to 4.3 inches. That's enslavement of the heart. And it's not giving you that freedom. See, the freedom is all about being free, not only from restrictions, but from the restrictions that keep you from being what you were meant to be. And that's where true fulfillment comes in.
I think it's utterly perplexing, particularly given where Christianity has taken us, not only Australia, but Western countries, I think, generally. The sort of ideas that have come out of Christianity, the abolition of slavery, for instance, has its genesis in Christian theological teaching.
I agree.
So I find it fascinating, but it's so sad. I mean, at the end of the day, this college decided that they would allow for a multi-faith stall,
provided it wasn't manned.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, this sort of idea that, you know, you have a multi-faith stall, and that if you don't have something like that, you're
I don't get it.
You're being too offensive to people who might be of a different religion.
Before you begin to think, so it's just a mental battle, right? It's just a psychological battle. Well, no, because listen to what he says in verse 3. He says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does." In other words, Paul says, look, understand something here. You're not primarily in a physical battle, are as much as it is a spiritual battle. It's not just a moral battle, it's also a mental battle. And unlike the world's wars, this war, he says, it's invisible. It's not a military war, it's a mental war. You're in a war in your mind, you're in a war of the mind, you're in a war for the mind.
Someone to make me strong, someone to make me belong, someone to make me alive. It was Jesus who claimed and proved himself to be the truth, the personification of truth, the truth incarnate. In a world that seeks to elevate preferences and feelings over facts and truth, you can find your fulfillment, I believe, in Christ, because in Christ, truth is personal. God bless you. Thank you.